Have you ever had that feeling? The one where you're running a race and you're so focused on the finish line that you don't realize you've been running on a broken leg for the last 10 miles. You just keep going. You tell yourself the pain is normal. You tell yourself the pain is the price of winning. For years, that was my life. I wasn't just running the race, I was celebrated for it. My exhaustion was mistaken for dedication. My anxiety was framed as ambition. My entire identity was built on being the person who could handle anything, until the day I couldn't. This isn't a story about how to be more productive. It's not a list of life hacks to cram more into your day. This is the story of how my pursuit of success led me to a complete and total collapse. This is the story of my burnout. And more importantly, it's the story of how I found my way back. If you feel like you're drowning, like you're just one more email, one more demand away from falling apart, then this is for you. Because I need you to know you are not alone, and this is not a personal failure. If you had looked at my life 5 years ago, you would have thought I had it all figured out. I was a senior project manager at a competitive tech firm. I had a great apartment, a loving partner, a solid group of friends. On paper, every box was ticked. And I believed it. I really did. My self-worth was directly tied to my output. My calendar was my Bible, and a blank space in it felt like a personal failing. I wore busy like a badge of honor. When someone asked, "How are you?" my default answer was always, "So busy, but good busy, you know?" But it wasn't good busy. It was the beginning of a slow erosion. It started with things that are so normalized in our work culture that we don't even see them as red flags. Do any of these sound familiar? The first thing I'd check in the morning before my feet even hit the floor was my work email. My phone was an extension of my hand. I'd be answering Slack messages while making dinner, reviewing a presentation while watching a movie with my partner. I called it multitasking. What it really was being half present in every part of my own life. Then came the Sunday scaries, that feeling of dread that starts creeping in around 3 p.m. on a Sunday, poisoning the last few hours of your weekend. For me, it became so intense, it felt like a physical weight on my chest. I'd start getting headaches on Sunday night, a preemptive strike from the stress that was waiting for me on Monday morning. I just thought, well, everyone hates Mondays, right? This is normal. But the list of normal things kept growing. I couldn't sleep through the night anymore. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., my mind racing, mentally drafting emails and running through my to-do list. I told myself I was just a light sleeper. I became completely dependent on caffeine to function. I'm not talking 1 or 2 cups in the morning. I'm talking a large coffee to start the day, another mid-morning, an espresso after lunch, and sometimes a diet soda in the afternoon just to push through the final hours. My body was running on fumes and artificial energy. I called it fueling my hustle. And my patience? It evaporated. The smallest things would set me off. A slow driver, a long line at the grocery store, a friend calling to chat when I was in the zone. I became irritable and distant with the people I loved most. I was so focused on my professional responsibilities that I completely neglected my personal ones. I'd snap at my partner for asking a simple question, then feel this wave of guilt and promise myself I'd be better tomorrow. But tomorrow was always just as demanding as today. These weren't just isolated symptoms. They were the warning signs of severe burnout, the flashing lights on the dashboard of my life, and I was actively choosing to ignore them. Why? Because in my world, the world of high achievers and hustle culture, these weren't signs of a problem. They were signs you were doing it right. Then I got the promotion I'd been working towards for 2 years. And instead of feeling relief or joy, all I felt was a crushing wave of pressure. My responsibilities doubled overnight. Now I wasn't just managing projects, I was managing people, their careers, their workloads, their problems. They became my problems. And this is where another layer of the burnout story comes in, one that I think a lot of women will recognize. It's the pressure to be the perfect girl boss, the one who is not only strategic and decisive, but also empathetic, nurturing, and always emotionally available. I felt this immense pressure to be the cool boss who never said no. Can you stay late to finish this? Of course. Can you take on this extra project even though your plate is full? No problem. I'll make it work. Can you mentor the new hire, plan the team outing, and also hit all your own impossible targets? Absolutely. On top of my actual job, I took on this invisible second job, the emotional labor of the entire team. And then I'd go home, and the mental load of my personal life would be waiting for me. Planning meals, scheduling appointments, remembering birthdays, managing the household finances. It all fell on me. Not because my partner was unhelpful, but because I'd positioned myself as the manager of our lives too. I was a CEO at work and a CO at home, and I was running two companies on the verge of bankruptcy. My body started sending louder signals. I developed chronic digestive issues, bloating, stomach pain. I was getting sick all the time, catching every cold that went around the office. I had persistent brain fog. I'd walk into a room and forget why I was there. I'd be in the middle of a sentence and lose my train of thought. It was terrifying. I felt like I was losing my mind. I went to a doctor. She ran some tests, told me everything looked normal, and suggested I might be suffering from anxiety. She prescribed some medication and recommended I try to reduce my stress. Reduce my stress. It felt like telling someone drowning in the middle of the ocean to try to be less wet. My entire life was stress. I didn't know how to function without it. Stress was my fuel. Or so I thought. In reality, it was the poison that was slowly shutting down my system, one organ at a time. This phase, this high-functioning anxiety, is perhaps the most dangerous part of the burnout journey. Because from the outside, I was excelling. I received a glowing performance review. My boss praised my unwavering commitment. My friends told me they were in awe of how I managed to do it all. I was being praised for my own destruction. And a part of me liked it. It validated the sacrifice. But the praise was hollow because I knew the truth. I wasn't thriving. I was surviving. And I was barely doing that. There's a concept in science called metal fatigue. It's when a piece of metal breaks after being subjected to repeated stress, even if that stress is below its normal breaking point. One day, it's holding up a bridge, and the next day, after thousands of tiny, invisible cracks have formed, it just snaps. That's what my breaking point felt like. It wasn't one big, dramatic event. It was the culmination of 1,000 tiny cuts. The day it happened was a Tuesday. It was no different from any other Tuesday. I had back-to-back meetings from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I hadn't had time for lunch, so I was surviving on coffee and a protein bar I'd eaten in the 3 minutes between calls. At 6:30 p.m., my boss slacked me. It wasn't a question, it was a demand. I need the revised deck for the client presentation on my desk by morning, top priority. It was a huge amount of work. It meant another late night, another canceled dinner with my partner, another night of 4 hours of sleep. And in that moment, something inside me just broke. I remember staring at the message on the screen, and the letters started to blur. My heart began to pound in my chest, so hard I could feel it in my throat. The hum of the office lights suddenly sounded deafening. My hands started to tingle. I couldn't breathe. I genuinely thought I was having a heart attack. I stumbled out of my chair and made my way to the office bathroom, locking myself in a stall. I slid down to the floor, my back against the cold tile, and I just fell apart. It wasn't crying. It was this ugly, guttural sobbing that I couldn't control. A panic attack. My very first one. All the stress, all the pressure, all the exhaustion I had been swallowing for years finally came boiling up to the surface. And my body just said, no more. I stayed on that bathroom floor for what felt like an hour. I didn't know what to do. The thought of going back to my desk, of opening that laptop, felt physically impossible. It was like my body and my brain had staged a mutiny. My partner called, then he texted. I ignored it. I couldn't speak. I couldn't explain what was happening because I didn't understand it myself. All I knew was that the person who walked into that bathroom was not the same person who was going to walk out. The mask of the high achiever, the girl boss, the woman who could handle anything, it hadn't just slipped, it had shattered, and I had no idea who I was without it. That night, I went home and told my partner I couldn't do it anymore. The next morning, I called my boss and told her I needed to take a medical leave of absence, effective immediately. I didn't give her the details. I just cited severe exhaustion and health complications. To my surprise, she was understanding. She told me to take all the time I needed. It was only later that I realized how easily replaceable I was. The machine keeps running with or without you. And so began the strangest, most terrifying period of my life. I call it the void. For the first week, I did nothing but sleep. 12, 14, 16 hours a day. My body was desperately trying to repay a debt of exhaustion that had been accumulating for years. When I was awake, I felt nothing, just a profound emptiness. My entire identity was wrapped up in my job, my productivity. Without it, who was I? I felt an immense amount of shame. Shame for not being strong enough. Shame for letting my team down. I'd scroll through Instagram and see friends and former colleagues celebrating work wins, going on trips, living their seemingly perfect lives, and I would feel this toxic cocktail of envy and self-loathing. I had failed. This is a part of the burnout recovery story that no one talks about. We talk about the hustle and we talk about the healing. We skip the part in the middle, the part where you feel completely lost. The part where your ambition, which once felt like a superpower, now feels like a curse that led you to this dark place. The quiet, the stillness, it's terrifying when you've used busyness as a shield against your own thoughts for years. I realized I didn't have any hobbies. I didn't know what I enjoyed doing anymore. My entire life had been optimized for work. I was a stranger to myself. And it was in that quiet, empty space, that void, that the real work had to begin. It wasn't about getting back to who I was. It was about figuring out who I was meant to be now. Recovery from severe burnout isn't a straight line. It's a messy, looping, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of dance. It didn't start with a big epiphany. It started with one very small, very simple step. My partner came home one day and found me on the couch, staring at the wall where I'd been for hours. He didn't say much. He just put my sneakers in front of me and said, "Let's just walk around the block." I didn't want to go. It felt like a monumental effort. But I did. And that short walk was the first domino. The next day, we walked 2 blocks. A few days later, I went to a yoga class. I was terrible at it, but for 1 hour, the only thing I had to focus on was my breath. I started to feel glimmers of a connection to my body that wasn't about pushing it to its limits, but about listening to it. The most crucial step I took was finding a therapist, someone who specialized in burnout and workplace trauma. And in my first session, she said something that changed everything for me. I was telling her how ashamed I felt, how I saw myself as a failure. And she looked at me and said, "Anna, burnout is not a personal failure. It is a predictable outcome of a broken system. You didn't fail. The culture failed you." Hearing that, it felt like I could finally breathe again. It shifted the blame from my character to my circumstances. It wasn't that I was weak. It was that I had been put in an impossible situation and told it was normal. My recovery was built on unlearning the toxic habits I had mistaken for a strong work ethic and slowly, intentionally building a new foundation. I want to share the core pillars of that foundation with you. My old definition of a productive day was a day where my to-do list was completely crossed off, no matter the cost to my well-being. My new definition of a productive day is one where I've honored my body's needs. Sometimes that means hitting a deadline, but more often it means stopping work at 5 p.m. It means taking a real lunch break away from my desk. It means recognizing that rest is not a reward, it is a requirement. It is just as productive as answering an email. In fact, it's more so, because without it, there is no quality work. My definition of success used to be a title, a salary, external validation. Now, success is internal. It's peace of mind. It's being present with my loved ones. It's having the energy to enjoy my life outside of work. It's ending the day feeling content, not just exhausted. This mindset shift is the bedrock of a sustainable life. This was the hardest part for me. As a recovering people pleaser, setting boundaries felt selfish and confrontational. But my therapist taught me that boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are guidelines to teach people how to treat you. They are acts of self-respect. I started small. I put a hard stop on my workday. At 5:30 p.m., my laptop closes. It doesn't get reopened, period. I removed work email and Slack from my phone. My evenings and weekends are now truly my own. This one action gave me back an incredible amount of mental real estate. I learned the power of the gracious no. When I was asked to take on a new project, instead of my old "yes, of course," I learned to say, "Thank you so much for thinking of me for this. Unfortunately, my plate is full right now, and I wouldn't be able to give it the attention it deserves. Perhaps we can consider it for next quarter." It's respectful, it's professional, and it's honest. Learning how to set boundaries is a superpower. It's the single most effective tool against burnout. For years, I treated my body like a machine that I was constantly trying to hack for more performance. Burnout was my body's way of screaming that it wasn't a machine. It was an ecosystem, and I had been polluting it for a decade. Recovery meant learning to listen to its signals instead of silencing them. When I felt tired, I rested. I didn't reach for another coffee. I prioritized sleep hygiene, no screens an hour before bed, a consistent bedtime. My bedroom became a sanctuary for rest, not a second office. I moved my body in ways that felt good, not punishing. I traded high-intensity workouts that spiked my cortisol for long walks in nature, gentle yoga, and dancing in my kitchen. I learned about nutrition, not for weight loss, but for energy and brain health. I learned how chronic stress depletes essential nutrients and started nourishing my body back to health. Your body is always communicating with you. Headaches, stomach issues, exhaustion, they aren't annoyances to be pushed through. They are vital data. Learning to listen to that data is life-changing. I never went back to that job. During my recovery, I realized that the environment was fundamentally incompatible with the life I wanted to build. I ended up transitioning into a new career, one that values outcomes over hours and allows for the flexibility my well-being requires. My life is not perfect now. I still have stressful days. I still have to be vigilant about my boundaries. Recovery isn't a destination you arrive at, it's a practice you commit to every day. But I am no longer running a race on a broken leg. I'm walking at my own pace on a path that I have chosen. I have replaced busy with present. I have replaced exhausted with content. The silence that once felt like a void now feels like peace. If you are watching this and my story resonates with you, if you are feeling the early tremors of burnout, or you are already in the middle of the collapse, please hear this. You are not failing. You are overwhelmed. You are not weak. You are carrying an unsustainable load. You do not need to be more resilient. You need a more humane environment and healthier boundaries. Your well-being is not a luxury to be earned after you've achieved everything else. It is the very foundation upon which a meaningful and successful life is built. Don't wait for your breaking point. Don't wait for the panic attack on the bathroom floor. You can choose a different path, and it can start today. It can start with one small act of self-respect. Close your laptop on time tonight. Take a real lunch break tomorrow. Say no to one small thing that you don't have the capacity for. Your journey back to yourself starts now, and you are worth the effort.